Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. I used these 3 plywood rectangles. I think I got them in a packet from Walmart for this project. I added some apple barrel burnt umber paint to a small amount of water and mixed it well to create a stain. I painted the stain mixture onto the wood and dried it with my heat gun. The stain was a little lighter than I wanted, so I added a small amount of Dollar Tree black acrylic paint and stirred it into the stain mixture. I applied the darker mixture to the boards, dried it with my heat gun, and then added another layer. The third coat gave me the richness I was looking for. I created these cut files in Design Space and then cut them out using Oracle 813 stencil vinyl. After weeding the vinyl, I applied it to some duck shelf liner. I know that sounds crazy, but I'll tell you this works great as transfer paper. I can reuse it over and over, and it's even great at picking up small print. I'll leave a link to the Amazon store I get mine from in case you want to give it a try. I applied the stencil to the stained wood, used my Mod Podge roller to make sure it was stuck good, and then removed the transferred paper. For the bonfire sign, I used Waverly Maze chalk paint, and the font I used was Abelia. I'm not sure how to say it, but here it is. And I think I got it from defont.com, but I'm not positive. I know it was a free font because I very rarely pay for fonts. Honestly, I can't remember ever paying for a font. I also used a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin as my stencil brush. I saw another crafter do this, and I'll tell you, it really works. In my opinion, I have been more successful with this than I do with actual stencil brushes. I pounced the paint onto the stencil. I did this because I wanted my lines to be as crisp as possible with as little bleed through as possible. I moved the bonfire sign out of the way and started working on the next sign. I used my Mod Podge roller again and thought I would give the Mod Podge squeegee a try to see if it would help the stencil stick better. For the apple cider sign, I used Waverly Moss chalk paint, and the font I used was Grillin'. I also decided to use a Dollar Tree paintbrush to apply the paint. And with that one painted, it's time for the third sign. After applying the vinyl, I used my finger to make sure the stencil was stuck. I used Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and the pouncing method with the Dollar Tree makeup sponge and clothespin. The font I used was Magazine. I'll try to find all of these fonts and leave links to them in the description. I wanted to try all 3 stencil methods to see which one gave me the sharpest lines. After the signs dried, I removed the vinyl to see how they turned out. The apple cider sign turned out perfect with no bleed through. The pumpkin sign has no bleed through, and using the pouncing method, it created a weathered look. Even the bonfire sign looked good, so I now know you need to use more than just a roller to attach the stencil. To make the stands for each of the signs, I used leftover pieces of paint sticks that I stained using the same mixture I used on the bonfire sign. I put hot glue on the side of the paint stick and attached it to the sign just a little bit above the bottom. You don't want to attach directly at the bottom or the sign won't stand up. I learned this earlier in my crafting adventures after making a sign and trying to figure out why it kept tipping over. And look at how cute these stenciled tiara tray signs turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think of these little tiara tray signs. I found this beautiful oval frame recently at a yard sale. It cost me $1. I really love the fact that the metal on top was already distressed and rusted. I used a small screwdriver and removed 2 of the 4 hooks on the back so I could take the frame apart. I cleaned the frame with awesome cleaner and a paper towel. I use this on everything I get from yard sales and Goodwill. And you would be surprised at all the dust, dirt, and just crud I get off of items with it. If you like Farmhouse Decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. I used my heat gun to dry the frame because I didn't want to wait for it to dry. I used this scrapbook paper I got from Hobby Lobby for the background. I used Mod Podge to attach it to the back of the frame. After the Mod Podge dried, I used a Dollar Tree nail file to remove the excess paper. In a downward motion, I rubbed the paper with the file. You can use sandpaper or a sanding block to do this also. This gave me smooth lines around the outside of the paper. I did have a little bit of the sides that wasn't covered, but I wasn't worried about it because it would be covered by the frame itself. I went ahead and added a layer of Mod Podge to the top of the paper because I didn't want the paper to rip when I applied the vinyl. This is another file I got from Design Bundles. I sized it to fit inside the frame, cut it out, and applied transfer paper. I removed the vinyl from the backing and applied it to the sign. And look at how cute this sign is. I'm glad I didn't do anything with the real wood. I may go back and add some clear stain to protect it, but I just love the natural wood look. Let me know in the comments what you think of this adorable little fall sign. I used this large buffalo check stencil from Chalkboard for the background. All I did was place my sign under a section of the stencil and tried to get it straight. I used my Mod Podge squeegee to make sure the stencil was stuck down by gently rubbing it across the stencil. I had already placed some Chalkboard paste in a little tray. I used a mini squeegee, placed some of the paste on the squeegee, and applied it to the stencil. I gently lifted the stencil up before the paste dried. And I was pleasantly surprised. The buffalo plaid turned out amazing. I set the paint by using my heat gun, but you can allow it to dry on its own. I used this Hello Fall file from Design Bundles and applied it to the front of the sign. I decided to use white vinyl so it would pop. It looks amazing. I decided to stain the wood and the back with Waverly antiquing wax, but it could be left with the natural wood color if that's what you like. Let me know what you think of this cute little tiara tray sign in the comments. This is a simple, easy, and quick fall DIY I think you're going to really love. I used Dollar Tree balloons to create these adorable little pumpkins. The first thing you'll want to do is cut the neck off of the balloons. I put 2 fingers in the balloon and grabbed a handful of stuffing and began stuffing the balloon until I was happy with the size. You can make these pumpkins whatever size you want depending on how much stuffing you put in them. After the balloon was stuffed, I rolled it around in my hand to shape it up. I added twine to add the indentions into the pumpkin. I actually tied the twine each time it overlapped. This actually helped to keep the twine in place. I tried just crossing it over, and when I got ready to move the twine into place, it would always slip off. When I was finished, I tied a knot at the top of the balloon. I moved the twine around and arranged it so that the balloon looked like a pumpkin. If you like farmhouse decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. Short twig as the pumpkin stem and hot glued it to the top. I was afraid the hot glue would melt the balloon, but it worked without any problems. I then glued Spanish moss to the top and shaped it up and trimmed it. And look at how adorable these 3 little pumpkins are. I'm going to get some other color balloons and make more of these for sure. I think they are so stinking cute, and they are so super easy to make. Let me know in the comments if you'll be adding these adorable pumpkins to your fall decor this season. This DIY is a twofer. 2 DIYs in 1. I used this Dollar Tree mug to make a pumpkin spice tea air tray mug. I cleaned the mug with rubbing alcohol and a paper towel to remove all the dust and oil from the mug. I created this cut file in Design Space, cut it, weeded it, and applied it to transfer paper. I laid the vinyl on the mug, and yes, some of it didn't lay right, but I worked around it. I decided I wanted to make a topper for the mug. I traced around the top of the mug onto a piece of cardboard. I then cut the cardboard just inside of the line. I did this because I didn't want the cardboard sticking out beyond the mug. I wanted it to sit on the rim of the mug. I used a Dollar Tree styrofoam ball and cut a quarter of it off with a knife. This gave me a flat bottom on the ball. Next, I placed hot glue on the cardboard circle and placed the flat end of the styrofoam ball on top of it. I used some old Dollar Tree caulk to create the whipped cream for the topper. I would actually recommend using a new tube because the caulking will come out so much easier. I applied the caulking around the cardboard and covered the styrofoam ball. I have made toppers in the past using fresh caulking, and it was a simple process to get the ball covered, but this caulk was old and some of it was dried out, so it gave me quite a fit. I eventually got everything covered with caulk. And if you don't want your hands covered in caulk, be sure to use some gloves. And then I realized I had made a small mistake. Just remember, be sure to place some wax paper under the cardboard before you start adding the caulking. Anyway, I used a knife and not so gently lifted the topper off of the mat and placed it on some wax paper. I sprinkled some cinnamon on top and also placed some whole cloves around the topper. I added some tan Dollar Tree beads to the topper just to give it a little more dimension. I also used some of these mini pumpkins I have in my stash and stacked them on one side of the topper and then sprinkled more cinnamon. I didn't have any cinnamon sticks, so I took one of these Dollar Tree plastic spoons that I think I got in the wedding section and cut off the spoon part. So all I was left with was the top part of the spoon. I stuck it into the caulk and part way through the styrofoam. Once the topper was dry, I brought it back in and placed it on top of the sweater weather mug. And just look at how adorable. Even though I used the old caulk, I still think it turned out pretty stinking cute. Let me know what you think in the comments. I found these 3 pumpkins in my stash, and the first thing I thought of was a stacked pumpkin. I then remembered I recently picked up some plaid fabric from Dollar Tree, and decided I would cover the pumpkins with some fabric for a unique look. I opened all the fabric and ironed it to get all the wrinkles out. I wrapped the fabric around the pumpkin and trimmed it to the size I needed. I poured some craft glue in a cup and began painting it onto the pumpkin. I then placed the fabric into the glue until I had went around the entire pumpkin. I ran my finger down the indentation of the pumpkins. On the bottom, I folded the fabric and glued it down also. I wasn't worried about this pumpkin not having fabric on the top because it will be the middle pumpkin and the top won't be showing. I did the same thing on the top of the pumpkin. For the second pumpkin, which will be the bottom of the pumpkin stack, I basically did the same thing. And then realized I had cut the fabric a little too short. So I decided this would be the back and just glued down another piece of the same fabric to cover the pumpkin. For the third pumpkin, which will be the top pumpkin, I glued down the fabric the same as the other two and made sure I cut enough fabric to be able to hide the top of the pumpkin. I folded the fabric onto the top and trimmed the excess. I placed the stem back on top of the pumpkin and glued it into place. I added hot glue to the top of the bottom pumpkin and placed the middle pumpkin on top of it. Before the glue dried, I added some ivy greenery between the pumpkins and added the third pumpkin to the top. I added another piece of ivy to the top pumpkin and some fall leaves. And just look at how stinking cute. I adore how the stacked pumpkins turned out. Let me know what you think in the comments. I used this little sign I got from Goodwill for 99 cents to create an adorable harvestier tray sign. I sprayed the sign with awesome cleaner and used a paper towel to remove all the dust, dirt, and grime. For the frame, I used Americana antiquing wax. I painted it on with a paintbrush and then removed it with a paper towel. For the inside, I used apple barrel white acrylic paint and dried it with my heat gun. I used this plaid paper I got from Hobby Lobby and used Mod Podge and some new Mod Podge brushes to attach it to the center of the frame. You can find a link directly to Plaid, where I get my Mod Podge and the accessories, in the description, in case you're like me and you can't find it in stores near you. Oh, and I also got this Mod Podge squeegee, which works great on thicker paper to remove the bubbles. I then added another layer of Mod Podge to the top of the paper to protect it. I removed the metal from this piece with a Dollar Tree scraper. I wanted to add it to the frame I had just finished. I first tried to attach the harvest part to the frame with hot glue, and then had to use super glue because of the metal. Metal and hot glue just don't like each other. I found these little pumpkins in a bag in my stash and thought they would be so adorable attached to this little sign. I hot glued them in the corner. This little tiara tray sign turned out cuter than I thought it would. And look at how stinking cute it is on this little tray. And it was so easy to put together. Let me know in the comments what you think of this little fall tiara tray sign. I just love it. I used this picture frame from my stash and some of the slats from a shutter to make an adorable little riser for some of my fall decor. After removing everything from the frame, I marked each of the slats where I needed to cut them down so that they would fit. I took them outside and cut them using my miter saw. After cutting them, I used Awesome Cleaner to clean the slats. To attach the slats to the inside of the frame, I used some Star Bond glue and accelerator. I'll leave a link in the description for Star Bond. This glue is amazing and works on almost any surface. I have used it in several videos, and trust me, if it didn't work, I wouldn't be recommending it to you. I applied the glue directly to the inside of the frame and the accelerator to the slat, and then held it in place for about 10 seconds. I did this until the entire inside of the frame was covered with the slats. I went around the outside edge with hot glue just to fill in any cracks and holes around the edge. Next, I hot glued these little wood pieces to the bottom and the corners for the feet. And I actually purchased them from Plaid also. I used Waverly Plaster Chalk Paint. This is my favorite chalk paint from Waverly. And painted the entire board and the feet. I then used Waverly Mineral Chalk Paint and a chip brush to distress the tray and the feet. I decided to go ahead and paint the bottom of the tray with the plaster paint and also to distress it for more of a finished look. And look at how beautiful this little tray or riser turned out. I absolutely love it. It is so stinking cute. Let me know in the comments what you think of the little riser. I picked up several of these wooden houses at a flea market back in May. I've already used a few of them in other DIYs and thought I would use this one to create a fall tier tray piece. I tried painting the house with Waverly pumpkin chalk paint, but it just wasn't covering all the colors. Even after 3 coats, I could still see parts of the original house. So I decided to use Waverly ink chalk paint as my base. I painted the entire house with the black paint and dried it with my heat gun. I then went back and painted the front of the house with 3 coats of Waverly pumpkin chalk paint. I left the roof, sides, and back black. And that actually worked. You couldn't see the house through the paint now. I created my cut file on Design Space, and you can find a link to it in the description. I cut it out, weeded it, and applied it to transfer paper. I placed the vinyl on the little house. And just look at how cute. I still wanted to add something. I used a piece of twine and wrapped it around the top of the house 2 times and tied a small bow. I used a lighter and burned off all the fuzzies from the twine. And now I have the perfect little house for my farmhouse tray. This little house is just so stinking cute. I am not kidding. Let me know what you think of this little house in the comments. I found this little truck at Hobby Lobby and thought it would be cute on a tier tray. With a paintbrush, I painted the bed and rails with antiquing wax. I let the wax sit for a little while because I wanted a darker color, and then rubbed it off with a paper towel. I painted the truck with Apple Barrel Harvest Orange acrylic paint. For the part above the wheels, I first painted them gray, and then moved on to the wheels. At this point, I didn't like the gray, so I used some metallic gray and dabbed it on with a makeup sponge. I used a small paintbrush to get the upper portion that was against the truck, and then decided to just paint the entire portion with the metallic paint. And y'all know me, I am so indecisive sometimes. Next, I dabbed a lighter metallic color on with another makeup sponge. And next, a little darker color. Okay, it's finally getting to what I see in my head. And now, a little metallic white. I then blended all the colors together. I did the same thing on the hubcaps. Next, I touched up some of the paint where I had gotten the metallic paint on the truck. Now that the truck was painted, it's time to work on the decal. I went into Design Space, added a square, sized it to the size I wanted the decal to cover, which was 2 inches, and changed the color to orange. I added my text, Hello Fall, but I couldn't decide which font I wanted to use, so I went to wordmark.it. This is a free website you can use to view all the fonts on your system. I typed in my saying and hit the little arrow. I was able to see the phrase with all the fonts on my system and decided to use Abigail 2 as my font. I went back to Design Space, searched my fonts for the Abigail 2, and changed the font on both words and sized them to fit. I uploaded these leaves from a Design Bundles file I had on hand, removed what I didn't want, and placed the leaves around the words. I cut the design out and applied it to the side of the farm truck. And excuse the noise in the background, but my grand dog is here again, and she's playing with a toy sitting right beside me. I added some miniature pumpkins to the back, and just look at how stinking cute it turned out. If you decide to try this DIY, I'd love to see the results. Post a picture on Instagram or Facebook, and use the hashtag Designs by Gaddis. I saw this adorable pumpkin on Pinterest and decided I would give it a try using some leftover pieces of paint sticks. I played around with the different size paint sticks until I liked the way the pumpkin looked. I used Waverly pumpkin chalk paint and painted all of the sticks. I dried the sticks with my heat gun and then used a finger sander to distress them. For the pumpkin stem, I used 2 pieces of an old shutter. You could use craft sticks or another paint stick for the stem also. I hot glued the 4 paint sticks onto the stem. I wanted the pumpkin to stand on its own, so I glued a Dollar Tree tumbling tower block to the back of the pumpkin. I used some raffia. I think I got this bundle at Hobby Lobby, but I'm not sure. Trimmed it to fit and glued it to the bottom of the stem right above the pumpkin. I used another small piece of raffia to make a simple bow and glued it to the top of the other raffia. I created the saying in Design Space. I'll leave a link to it in the description for any Cricut users. I removed the sayings and applied them to each section of the pumpkin. I added some dimension to the pumpkin using a fan brush and Waverly antiquing wax. I also used it on the back and sides of the pumpkin. And look at how stinking cute this pumpkin is. Let me know in the comments if you would have done anything different. I think it looks amazing. I saw these adorable pallet pumpkins on Facebook and knew I wanted to make a few for myself. I painted 3 Dollar Tree palettes with orange acrylic paint that I got from Dollar Tree. The only paint I've used from Dollar Tree was the white, and I didn't like it, but I was very impressed with this orange. The color is bright and the coverage is amazing for $1 acrylic paint, I will definitely be using more of their colored paints in the future. I mixed the paint with water to create an orange stain. I wanted the wood grain to show. I painted the 2 smaller pallets with the stain. For the larger palette, I mixed in a small amount of apple barrel burnt umber, so the color would be a little darker than the 2 smaller palettes. And then I realized I really liked the darker color, so I went back and added it to the 2 smaller palettes. I had this ivy in my stash and thought the stem would be perfect for the pumpkin stems. After cutting the stem, I used a marker to make a little curl in the stem for the pumpkins, and then straightened the end so I could glue it to the back of the pallets. At first, I was going to use the ivy leaves, but then remembered I had some fall leaves and decided to use them. I hot glued everything onto the pallets. If you like Farmhouse Decor and DIYs, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. And if you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I upload a new video. I then made 2 simple bows using this Dollar Tree ribbon and hot glued them to the front of the 2 smaller pallet pumpkins. I decided to wrap some twine around the larger pumpkin. The 2 smaller pallet pumpkins will stand on their own, and I added 2 tumbling tower blocks to the back of the larger one to help it stand. I glued the blocks even with the bottom boards running across the back. And look at how stinking cute these little pallet pumpkins turned out. They are so farmhouse. I love them. Let me know in the comments what you think of these adorable little pumpkins. I found these 2 wood pumpkins in my stash, and it looks like I got them from Target last year and never used them. I decided to engrave a couple of cute phrases on them. On the first pumpkin, I stained it and let it dry completely first. I used a design bundles file, set it up, and started the laser. If you don't have a laser, you can use vinyl and get a similar result. I just love using my new laser. I'm like a kid with a new toy. All I want to do is play with my new toy. Are you the same way when you get something new? Let me know in the comments. To finish both the pumpkins off, I used some fall color ribbon and tied a simple bow. Simple for most people, but if you've been following me for a while, you know I have a huge problem with bows. And it takes me forever to figure out how to tie one. I then glued the ribbon to the stem of each pumpkin. And I think both of these pumpkins turned out so stinking cute. And they are so adorable on my fall tier tray. I used this little frame I found in my stash to make a boho inspired beaded lantern. After removing the embellishment from the front, I realized I would have to use the back of the picture because of the paper on the front. I used my X-Acto knife to score the hot glue that was holding in the board and pushed it out gently with my fingers. Once the board was removed, I used a finger sander to remove the paper that had come off and to smooth the edges of the frame. To reattach the frame, I used some Starbond glue. If you haven't used Starbond adhesives, you need to give them a try. I absolutely love them. They adhere quickly, and if you use the accelerator, it's even quicker. I started using Starbond a couple of months ago, and I'm really impressed with the quality of the product. I haven't found anything that it doesn't work on. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to take a look. I put a small amount around the inside edge of the frame and then replaced the backing. I held it down for about 10 seconds before moving on to the next step. With my drill and a bit a little larger than the wire I'll be using, I drilled holes into the corners of the backing. I then painted the entire frame and base with Waverly plaster chalk paint, and of course dried it with my hot air gun. I used 20mm natural wood beads for the feet of the lantern. I placed painter's tape on the bottom of 4 of these, and you'll see why in a minute. I purchased a coil of this aluminum wire at Hobby Lobby and cut the lengths that I wanted with some wire cutters. This aluminum wire is flexible, but it will hold its shape. I don't remember what gauge it is, but it was the largest I could find. To attach the feet and the wire to the base, I filled the hole in the bead with hot glue, placed the wire through the hole in the base, and pushed it down into the bead. I did this until all 4 legs and wires were attached to the base. To make sure everything was attached well, I used more of the Starbond adhesive in the corners. I used the small mini attachment that came with the glue and applied it in the corners and pressed the wire against the side of the base. Next, I added 14 20mm natural wood beads to each of the wires. I get my beads from Amazon, and you'll find a link to them in the description. I decided to leave the beads the natural color instead of painting or staining them. Once all the beads had been added, I used my fingers and some pliers to bend the wire up. While I was bending and working on the top of the wire, I was also bending the wire into the shape I wanted the lantern to be, and bending the wires so that they touched each other. I had to do a little trimming of the wire so the little top piece would sit flush with the beads. To attach the top piece, I filled the hole with hot glue, placed it on the wire, and turned everything upside down while the hot glue set up. I went ahead and removed the painter's tape from the feet and cleaned up any areas where the glue had seeped through. I left the beads the natural color because I have another lantern with natural beads but you could paint or stain them to match your decor. I added some Dollar Tree fall leaves and a candle to the lantern. And just look how stinking cute it turned out. The other lantern I made was more difficult to make because I didn't have this wire. I used skewers. So I would definitely recommend using this wire. It gives a nice curve and can be manipulated into whatever shape you desire. Let me know in the comments where you would use this adorable natural wood lantern. I'm going to be putting it on the shelf in my family room. I found this glass vase in my stash, and I had picked up some flannel fabric from Dollar Tree. I laid the vase onto the fabric to figure out where I needed to cut it. And of course, I tried to find a line to follow because I can't cut a straight line to save my life. I used my Cricut heat press to remove all the wrinkles from the fabric. I added some craft glue to the vase and attached the fabric. I continued doing this until the fabric was all the way around the vase. The first vase was a little tricky. I wasn't able to get the stripes on the fabric straight because the vase was angled, not straight. I continued adding glue and smoothing it out with my finger until I reached the end where the fabric met. I trimmed off the excess fabric. I tried to straighten the fabric out some, but that really didn't work that well. So, if you're going to try this project, be sure to use a vase or glass that is symmetrical or a cylinder, not anything with an angle. Or use fabric that doesn't have stripes. I added craft glue to the bottom and pushed the fabric into it. I decided to use hot glue on the top inside of the base. I put the hot glue on the fabric and then pressed it into place. Since this vase was a cylinder, it was so much easier than the first vase. I was able to keep the lines pretty straight. I trimmed the fabric and added hot glue to finish it off. I added more craft glue to the bottom and pressed the fabric into it. I turned the top of the fabric down onto the base and used hot glue to hold it into place. I am so happy with the way this vase turned out. To finish both of the vases off, I tied some twine around the tops and into a little bow and added a bead to the ends of the twine. I love how they both turned out, even the vase with the not so straight lines. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're like me you have made a ton of things using these Dollar Tree boxes and have a ton of the lids left. I wanted to use the lids that I have in my stash. I used tumbling tower blocks and hot glued them around the lids. For this box, I used a block as a spacer and then went all the way around the lid. I went back in and glued blocks between the previous blocks, but I glued them at the top of the lid for a staggered look. To make sure the blocks were secure, I added hot glue to the inside of the blocks. When I was finished, I stained everything with some gel stain. And just look at how adorable it turned out. On another lid, I glued the blocks all the way around the lid and added some wood beads to the bottom. I think both of these turned out so stinking cute. And now I have 2 less lids in my stash. I used 6 Dollar Tree wood blocks, a ruler, and a pencil. I found the center of each block by placing the ruler from corner to corner and placing a light mark with the pencil. Once all 6 blocks were marked, I used my drill and a large drill bit to drill a hole through each of the blocks. I placed a scrap piece of wood under the block so my drill bit wouldn't drill into my desk. I used a finger sander and sanded each of the blocks. I wanted to remove all the little spurs after I drilled the holes. I painted each of the blocks with Waverly ink chalk paint. Once the blocks were dry, I placed a piece of tape at the end of some twine. I did this so the twine would be easier to string through the blocks. I began by stringing one 25mm bead onto the twine, then a block 2mm beads, and I continued this pattern until I reached the end. I tied the ends of the twine so the beads and blocks would stay on, leaving a little space so the twine could move. Using my Cricut and some tan vinyl, I cut out the word family and applied the vinyl to the blocks. I applied a layer of satin Mod Podge to the blocks to seal and protect them. This is the Kirkland's image that I was duping. And this is mine. I think it turned out perfect, and it cost me $6 compared to $25. And who doesn't like to save money? I have several of these pieces of wood in my stash. They measure approximately 5 inches by 7 inches, the perfect size for a wood book stack. The first book I painted with Waverly pumpkin chalk paint. I painted another with Waverly plaster chalk paint. And the last one I used Waverly antiquing wax. Using my Cricut, I printed out the words for the spine of the books. After cutting and weeding the vinyl, I used transfer tape to apply the vinyl to the spines of the books. I kept the books together so I was able to line up the words evenly on the spines. I applied a layer of Mod Podge to the spines of the books and to the top book to protect it. After the Mod Podge had dried completely, I used a piece of twine and wrapped it around the bottom of the book stack and tied a simple knot. I didn't glue the book stack together, so I can arrange it however I want, and I can also use the books individually. And just look at how stinking cute. This is the perfect addition for your fall decor, and it's so simple and easy to make. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I got this cute little owl candle holder at Goodwill for $1.99. It was cute and everything, but a little dated to me. I used some Waverly mineral chalk paint and painted the entire owl, even the inside. But that didn't give me the look I was going for. So I added some Dollar Tree spackling and some of the mineral chalk paint in a bowl and mixed it up. I used a paintbrush and applied the mixture to the entire piece and dried it with my heat gun. I used a skewer to knock off some of the mixture around the eyes and in the holes of the owl so you could still tell what it was. And when I was finished, this is what it looked like. I wanted to bring out more of the details of the owl. In a small container, I mixed some Waverly antiquing wax and water together. I applied this lightly to the owl with a chip brush. And I just loved how the antiquing wax looked on the little owl. After the owl was dry, I placed some floral foam into the opening at the top of the owl. Since you could see the floral foam through the holes in the front of the owl, I used some reindeer moss and shoved it in to cover the floral foam. Next, I added various floral picks from Dollar Tree. And just look at how stinking cute the owl turned out. And it just looks amazing on my fall tier tray. Let me know in the comments what you think of this adorable little owl. Alright, for this project, we're going to make a little gnome for fall. What you're going to need is some type of fabric. I'm using an old shirt. A mop, and I just took this mop head off of a mop from Dollar Tree. ping pong ball from Dollar Tree. Got a black sock. And I picked up some of these red kidney beans from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use this hazelnut Waverly chalk paint for the nose. So let's go ahead and paint the nose so it can be drying. And I'm going to set that to the side. Okay, the next thing we want to do is get our kidney beans, and we're going to put them in the sock, in this black sock. Now I'm going to make a hole here. I may have to actually cut off some of this sock. A little bit too long. And now I'm going to hot glue this with a hole in it because I want to be able to hot glue the mop head down into the sock, like so. So I'm just going to fill this up with a lot of hot glue. Take my mop head and hold it down in there. Now I'm just going to take the hot glue gun. I'm just going to go around the edge because I really don't want the head to fall off. Okay, so hopefully that will hold it. So here is the front of the gnome, and we're gonna go ahead and make the little hat while we're letting our ball dry. So all I'm going to do is cut the shirt. Trying to cut it on the sort of on the seam. There we go.
So what I'm doing is cutting this arm off. Cut on that seam. Oop, didn't cut that one right, so it ripped wrong. Try that again. Okay, so once you have your fabric cut out, you may have to iron it, like I'm fixing to have to do. And now what I'm going to do is just cut it down the middle. Or maybe not. I may just do this. That should fit fine. So I'm just going to start down here and just cut up at an angle. So now I'm going to run a line of hot glue here so all this goes away so that it'll look nice and neat. And my hot glue is already dried. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I am actually going to iron like this to give it a seam for me to put my hot glue in. Now I'm going to run down through here with the hot glue. And just create a hem. Okay, so that is my outside, so I need to fold these together and then also fold this under here and glue it down. And they start here. And iron this down. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. But basically all this is doing is covering up the raw edge. And now we will put our edges together. And there was hot glue on the bottom of my table here, and it has melted, causing my paper not to want to lay right. Trying to figure out the best way to do this. It's got to be turned this way and glued. Okay. So we'll start down here at the bottom of the little hat. Put some hot glue. And then we're just going to run the hot glue all the way up. Okay, and now we're just going to turn our little hat in right side out. Then we're going to take our little hat, put it down over our gnome. I missed a spot on gluing, did not realize that. Give me just a second. What I'm thinking about doing is putting a little pom-pom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little pom-pom from Dollar Tree and I'm just going to hot glue it onto the little hat, the little gnome's hat. See, isn't that cute? It's a little bit different. And there is our little fall gnome with his cute little pom-pom on his hat.
Please take a second to like this video and leave me a comment. This really helps my channel to grow so others just like yourself can find me. If you just found me, I hope you will join our little family by hitting the subscribe button. If you are already part of the family, thank you so much for your love and support. Y'all are the absolute best. Check out my new Amazon store for craft supply and farmhouse home decor recommendations. All the products I use from Amazon in my videos can be found there. Until next time, happy crafting.